talk about a wide variety of topics today and cover several things that we will group base called social dynamics. Maybe a little 101 if it's your first time ever experiencing some of this stuff, but I'm sure you have a lot of questions out there on what we are going to cover. So please feel free to ask. Um, just recently, I was talking to some friends of mine, and we were covering, sitting around a table late at night playing cards, drinking some beers, and we were talking about the game, quintessential book that came out, almost 20 years ago, maybe more than 20 years ago now, and whether or not it still applies to the world we live in. Um, when it came out, it was revolutionary, and at least in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'm sure just about every other major city in the world, you could not go to a bar or a club or really any event and not see people with giant baggy Jamiroquai hats on and scarves and leather studded bracelets and white patent leather belts. And at that time, it was, uh, what they call peacocking was so stunning that everybody kind of paid attention to it and everybody was enamored by it. So, has that worn off in today's day and age when people, people dress just about how any way they want? I don't think so. I think that effort that has to be done is probably being noticed, and so that's something that has been applicable for the last half a million years, or however long that human beings have been potential target. Well, there's a lot of things that they could kind of live in that circle. But those guys in the game, they were doing something that really nobody had thought about at the time, that peacocking thing. So I think that, you know, we could still apply some of those things today. I know that personally, I've never been a fan of wearing my thoughts or beliefs on my shirt. But again, I'm 6'3" and I have pretty big shoulders. So, if I was talking to somebody that maybe was a different height or had a different build, certainly I would love to see a t-shirt with something crazy on it that's going to get attention and looks and, kind of make you stand out in the crowd. Um, all you need is an opener, right? All you need is a look. All you need is some kind of, sign of interest that can get you to bridge that gap and give you an opening to talk to people. And, I know it's kind of taboo maybe in 2026, but talking to strangers in the world is kind of the way that it's supposed to work. Um, Bar culture, nightlife culture, drinking culture, whenever you have alcohol anywhere, you kind of have a lubricant that allows everybody to mingle and get together. But not everybody wants to drink every night. Not everybody wants to go out every night. So, how do you bridge the gap? I mean, we're a social species. We're supposed to talk to each other and express our ideas and emotions and create new friends. So, how do you do that? Well, if a t-shirt is what works for you, or a crazy hat, or wild shoes, I say go for it. I think that there's a fine line to walk between being a jester and being somebody who's out there, performing for the king and the royal court. And there's a fine line between that and, you know, being taken seriously. But sometimes you just got to get your foot in the door. Um, so there's one thing there. I think also that, one of the other things you have to think about is, very simple Zig Ziglar kind of thing. The first time you meet somebody, you're creating a first impression. I mean, I guess maybe if you're sitting behind them at a baseball game, you might be able to get away with a couple, different comments or introductions. But for the most part, anytime you're meeting somebody, you're working with the idea of congruency. And so the first vibe that you give off, the first, feeling that you give somebody, that was the lighting effect, that is going to really determine a lot about what narrative they create for you in the future, and how what if you oh hold on, we got a question. What if you don't drink? How can you just chill at a bar without drinking alcohol? Uh, Absolutely great, great message. So one of my good friends who is probably the life of every party in every room he walks into. He always orders one specific drink. He goes to the bar, he asks for a club soda, and he gets a splash of cranberry juice with a lime in it and a straw. He pulls the straw out and sets it on the bar. He squeezes the lime in it and he tips $10. And to do that is gonna, that's the best camouflage you have. I think the worst thing you can do is announce to everybody in the place that you don't drink. I don't think you ever have to explain your actions. As we were talking about with congruency, I think that it's very incongruent to give an explanation for your activities while you're doing them. I think that in that kind of John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Wild West bar scenario, it's loud, things happen quickly. So the best thing you can do is to order a club soda with a splash of cranberry and a lime. And if you don't want that, make it up on the fly. But by God, by God, don't explain yourself. And if somebody tries to buy you a shot, just say no. You don't ever have to justify your actions with explanation. You don't have to tell them that you stopped drinking, or that your grandmother or your parents drank themselves to death, and this is this whole reason, and make it a big old thing. That definitely takes us out of the vibe that we want to create. A bar is about having fun and nightlife, and it's supposed to be an enjoyable experience. So if you don't drink, that's easy. I think anymore, the idea of having to have something in your hands, that's kind of what it was about, right? It was kind of like the old, having something in your hand and sipping and giving pause. Somebody says something, you take a drink before you respond. It kind of makes it feel cinematic. It can kind of create a movie or a Hollywood like feeling for an environment, which works really well. But I mean, you're more than welcome to create that pause naturally and just think about what you're going to say next, like that. Feel free to ask any more questions. We're rolling live here. That was Mick. Back on congruency, you know, as we're meeting people out there for the first time, the first thing they see with us is going to create a narrative. So, it's hard, especially because I think a lot of the people that are watching this are, looking for long-term relationships and want to build genuine, honest connections with other people. And so, you're thinking that maybe coming off as, funny or a joke or, kind of this unnatural sense of, okay, hold on, we got a new one. I read the game way back when. I feel like it encouraged people to put on a performance, which is a hard act to maintain in a long term relationship, in my opinion. 100%. Who wrote this? LD, you get it. Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. The idea of, you know, trying to be the funniest and, trying to be the jester night one. I mean, if you have to, we can all kind of understand how grinding that is. But the converse of this is true. This is why I think in the beginning, you know, to the socially acceptable point, I mean, you're going to have people shit test you. You're going to have people, you know, create conflict. And so how you handle that in the very beginning is important because you don't want to come off as the kind of person that lets people walk on them all over them, but you also don't want to come off as the kind of person that isn't serious. Because again, the goal for so many of the people watching this is to create a serious relationship. So, one of the things to start off congruent and to create congruency from the beginning is making sure that whenever you go out that you're grounded and that you are emotionally present and whole so that when you talk to people, you can be your honest, authentic self. I would never coach anybody or advise anybody to not be themselves. I think sometimes maybe what happens is, the pieces of our personality are kind of splayed out like a puzzle. And, if we're out again at a bar, drinking every night, kind of creating these, personas to get physical pleasure in the short term, we're really only ever focusing on one piece of the puzzle, and we're not attaching these pieces of the puzzle to each other so that we come off as a full congruent person. And maybe, maybe the reason that you or a lot of the people watching this haven't found the the relationships that they want to see, whether it be in romantically or with friendships or outward in life, is because they're not coming across as a whole congruent picture. They're coming across as these little puzzle pieces. So, the first thing that me and my friends would do way back when is we would go out, just the three of us, and we would start off at, a little country bar. A lot of times we would go to a gay bar because it was absolutely more exciting and more fun. And who doesn't want to get, compliments and free drinks to start off the night with? But we would go out there and we would talk, just the three of us. So we were already having a good time. We were already, vibing. We were already fun before we even went out and tried to talk to anybody else in the world. And we would talk about the things. Maybe we would sit and talk about how stressful work was, or what was going on in our family lives, or frustrations. And so by doing that, before we ever went out and talked to a single person that we didn't know, before we went ever out and opened anyone or talked to us, a stranger, we were connecting these puzzle pieces together. And and that's one of the best reasons why having positive and linked up bros, having uh, great interpersonal relationships with people before you go out and do this. And that's why the wingman is the wingman, right? um, but having these kind of relationships is so important, so that when you go out, if you're going out with these three guys and you're going out and you want to go meet people and have a great night, which should always be the goal. The goal should always be just having an incredible time, right? Before, I mean, even if you're not going to a bar or a club, whatever you're doing, the goal should be to have an incredible time with your friends or by yourself. If you're living that narrative, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? So any attempt at inauthentically trying to recreate that, that's where we go wrong. Um, I was watching a old scene from the Mary Tyler Moore show, and I don't know the character's name, but he was given guidance, and he was like, let me guess, you're stuck in a rut. You wake up and you brush your teeth, and then you drink some coffee, and you get ready for work, and you go to work, and you read the newspaper, and you come home from work, and you turn on the TV, and you eat dinner, and you go to bed. And she's like, well, yeah, of course. It's like, she's like, well, how do I fix that? And he's like, well, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you drink the coffee, you go to work. You get the idea. The idea, is that living fully is the attraction point. Living fully is the magnetic thing. And so I think that, in the game, I think that what Neil Strauss opened up with a lot of those guys is that, yeah, a lot of the guys that were a part of that circle were flawed. A lot of the things they were doing, easily you could say today are manipulative, are, especially now, you could say that a lot of these things are stuff that nobody would at least want to admit that they were doing today, let alone 20 years ago. But Neil Strauss perfectly shows in that book the idea that, what he was learning as he moved through these systems was that becoming congruent, put together, aware, and grounded, that these things laid the real foundation for him to be successful, with the opposite sex or with whatever partner he was looking after. Um, and that, I think, is one of the points that can't be missed in this whole thing. The other thing that I kind of just touched on was that, as guys, and I mean, I'm going to assume that most of us are guys here, that we have probably one of the most fatal flaws that happen in this kind of social dynamic world, which is that we're always looking for strategies, and we want these systematic, data driven, numbers driven, approach driven methods to getting what we want, which I think if you asked, any person who's not involved in this world would tell you is a catastrophic way to live your life. But it's what our mind is set up for. I mean, it's how we put people on the moon. It's how we develop develop medicine and science and physics and all of these things. So our brains want this. They want this kind of established bullet point that we can go on Chat GPT and have it create a 101 step plan for us to go out and talk to people. And of of course, if you do that, you're going to have success. I think a lot of the pickup guys for back then were manipulating women, and I don't think it is sustainable long term. Yeah, yep, lone wolf extreme, 100%. I do agree with you. I think that that is probably the manipulation aspect is probably what gave the game its worst. What the hangover from that was societally, and there was a huge hangover in 2010, 2015. I mean, if you tried to use any of those pickup lines back then or today even. I mean, it comes off pretty cheesy. I think that your comment is spot on. I think that I mean, it's obviously not sustainable long term because what are you going to do? A magic trick every day for the rest of your life, right? Like, that's you run out of bullshit questions to ask people pretty quickly. But who lies more, men or women, and these kind of things. I mean, you can't live like that long term. You're not going to carry a relationship like that. But I think what one of the things that you had uncover in that question is to what extent is the manipulation and to what extent is this a two-way street, right? Like people human, both sexes, all sexes, people want to be entertained and people want to be wooed, people want to be charmed, so having that feeling of being impressed. I mean, it's like I'm never saying don't be impressive. I'm never saying don't be entertaining or don't wow people. I think if you're lying about what you want, and you're not being upfront with what your goal is from the very first moment that you talk to somebody, that is where you're manipulating. And obviously manipulation is wrong, and that's not what Excalibur men do. um, I've never been on a date with a girl. I've never gotten a girl's phone number. Instagram's only. I'm 26 and really outside of apps or Instagram. I don't think girls want to be approached in public unless it's a really attractive guy. So you can break this down a lot of ways. I'm going to start from the back of your comment and work to the front. So, one, I'm going to assume that you are a guy. And my assumption is that you think maybe you don't think that you are a really attractive guy. So, since you're a guy, it's going to be very hard for you to tell what an attractive guy is. And women and men and people, human beings are vastly different. So everybody has a type. And I know that sounds like bullshit rhetoric, but in reality, it's true. I mean, you're not going to find one person, one woman, one man who is into. One second, I'll get to you right in a second. Steel Reaper, rad name. I like Thunderstrike 9 too, some metal stuff. So you're not going to find somebody who think who everybody has a different type. Let me say it that way. So working back, it's not your job to determine who an attractive guy is. That's not for a woman. I mean, that's not how this thing should work. If you're focusing on that, you're kind of off the mark already. Look at a dartboard. You're throwing for the bullseye, right? If you're looking at trying to figure out who she thinks is attractive, I mean, like your mindset is so far out of being grounded and congruent and together, you're going to fail immediately there. So I think that that's where, the kind of the numbers game comes into play. You need to be out. If you're worried that you're not attractive, obviously work on things that are wrong. I mean, if you have unhealthy lifestyles or, unhealthy issues, I mean, you got to figure that out. But there's us knowing what the world finds attractive, we're never going to win that way. So throw it away, put it in the trash. Um, Go meet more people. Go out into the world and meet more people. Pick up honest hobbies. Pick up things that you really like. Join a sports team. Do I don't know where you live explicitly where you're from, but go out and do things that create connections with people that supersede attractiveness because eventually everybody's unattractive. So, obviously at 26, yeah, I can pretty much guess where your head was. I know where my head was at 26, but you know, at 26, you want a certain lifestyle and you want to have a certain kind of fun. But I would bet more than anything that you want to be with somebody that you actually have a real connection with and that you care about because that makes all the time you spend together incredible. Taking a picture on a beach with somebody hot, that's cool on Instagram and it lasts 30 seconds, and then you got to deal with their bullshit, right? So, if you really want to look back on your life and remember these incredible times from your 20s, you want to be with people you care about. I don't think girls want to be approached in public. I mean, if you seem like the guy at Costco when you walk out of Costco, I don't know where you live if you have Costco there, but when you walk out of Costco here, um, as you're walking out, there's people trying to sell you stuff. They're trying to sell you refrigerators and air conditioners and water softeners and tires. I mean, I don't want to talk to any of those people. Our time is so short. Who would want to be approached in public by a random person with zero intent and who this is something that's never changed. This has always been the case. Now, person approaching somebody in public, which should be a pretty safe space in public. Obviously you're not doing this on a street at 3 a.m. But what are if you're grounded, congruent, and have something to say, I mean, who again, who doesn't want to be wowed? I think people want to be wowed in public all the time. So live in the world, be the kind of person that offers these things. I'm 26, only ever dating on apps and Instagrams. If you're 26 years old, you got to be out in the world. There's no reason to be on your phone. That end all be all. If it's not working, why keep doing what doesn't work? I mean, sitting on Tinder and Bumble and Instagram all day, you're competing with bots and the algorithms at this point. Why does it work? It doesn't work for jobs. It's not going to work for this. Go out, meet people, figure it out, be dynamic, write your problems down, solve them with real, honest to God thought, and be somebody that people want to talk to, and be somebody that people want to be around. And that apps and Instagram stuff can go away. Getting a girl's phone number, there if you're do what I just said, they're going to ask you for your phone number. That's the better part, right? Imagine not having to ask. Imagine being somebody that is dynamic enough that you magnetize people and they have to contact you and find you. That will happen. Do I watch guys like Owen Cook or Todd Valentine? Yes, I do. I mean, back in the day when I was young, when I was a younger buck, I definitely watched that kind of stuff. I studied it. I've always been a little bit of a, arrogant and analyzer. So I try to find what's wrong with things. Maybe, we could digest that, but I don't think what they're saying is bad. I think that Todd Valentine definitely has made some salient points. And so much of the world of this kind of thing is regurgitation of material that's been around for 40 years, if not 50 years. And you can go back to, the 30s and the Master Key System, right? And if you've never read the Master Key System, everybody should get that book. But you look at these things and what is the ultimate message that anybody is saying is, be congruent, right? Don't you can't change who you are every time. Don't be a creep. If you're a creep, you lose, right? That should be obvious. Keep the anxiety and the systematic feel as low as possible so that you're not just being thrown in as another number. You're not just one of the 20 guys that walked up to someone in a bar and tried to get their phone number immediately. Like when you think about that kind of technique and you think about that from the other side of the rainbow, right? You think about what it must be like to have somebody like that, to have that kind of life. It becomes almost obvious how to usurp that in social dynamics. It becomes obvious. It's almost like sales, the Wolf of Wall Street sell this pen kind of thing. I mean, you realize that everybody in the world is going after what they think this pot of gold is. And if you can keep, I mean, like Rudyard Kipling says, right? Like keep your composure when everything else is falling around. When you can when you can have the internal strength and the inner strength to not panic and not have to just jump at every tennis ball that's thrown at you, then all of the water, it calms down. All the cloudy dirt and silt in the water calms and falls to the bottom, and you can see who it is you're actually talking to. Who is this person? Somebody even, a person that you want to meet or want to know. And if you can observe them and listen, and you can understand this person, then the question, I mean, if it's not yes, then why would you be approaching anyway, right? I think that we've had a lot of good questions on here, and covered a lot of material from people all over the world with great questions about what to do next. Unfortunately, we are running low on time, and this will not be our last interaction. The next time we come in, we're going to talk about frame in full detail, and we'll talk about opening anxiety. Much love to everybody out there. Be a good person. Be